am Liz Homer. I'm the curator of the Turner Dodge House, and I welcome you to our 5th year of the Meet Your City program, a program that's designed to acquaint our citizens with the history of our community and of our state. And tonight, Robert Hudson, who we call Rock Hudson, is going to talk about what he has learned while researching his own historic house here in Lansing. And he's developed a wonderful packet of information. And if you have been curious about how people go about finding out about an old house, this is your chance. So, Rock, you want to start?
Sure.
I should mention, Rock, he's a member of the Friends of Turner Dodge and also of the Greater Lansing Historical Society.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody that's in attendance tonight and for everybody that's going to be viewing this in the coming weeks. What I'll be doing this evening is sharing my experiences that I have had researching my house and some of the resources that you'll be using if you choose to go ahead with this also. And at the end of the presentation, we will put a number up where you can call and receive the package of information that covers the information that I will be showing here, with a list of resources and numbers that you could call also. But to start off with, the first thing you would want to do when you want to look at the history of your house is to look for your abstract. And you might want to go to your paperwork files, the people that did your mortgage, and if you are lucky enough to still find one, you might find something that looks a little bit like this. And it's going to have something up there saying the company, and what this abstract is going to do is going to take you back to when the state actually bought your land and take you through the history of it. But these are very rare. Most mortgage companies do not have these anymore. But you can ask around and see if you can find something like this. There's going to be a lot of legal jargon on that. It's going to have a lot of descriptions of transfers and legal deeds and things like that, but there are some things where you'll find some famous people might have owned your property in the past, and if they've added to or subtracted from the property with the neighbors and the boundaries too. Some of the documents you're going to be finding when you go down to your local county courthouse, ours is in Mason, you're going to be looking for grantor grantee indexes. And what these do is these list by seller and by date who owned the property and who sold it, and also you can also look it up by who is buying the property from who, and it's also by date. Now I want to give you a word of warning. When you are looking for these things, you're going to be needing some materials. Good pad of paper, some pencils. Definitely take a magnifying glass. And if you have a small hand light also, that would be good also. Some of my documents that I researched were over 100 years old, and the text is faded, and back then everything is in cursive. They're writing it out. So sometimes it's kind of difficult to decipher what you're looking for, and your eyes are going to get kind of tired, so that magnifying glass really does help. But this is one of the documents that I did pull up from the county courthouse in Mason. And this just details one of the transactions where they bought and sold my property.
Did it just get sad?
Can you ask questions along the way, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was that a microfiche, or was that actual paper that you pulled up?
That was microfiche. Most of the documents, I deal mostly in the 1800s for my house. That's all on microfiche, probably after the 50s, I would guess, from what I've seen. You might be able to pull up a real document. It's going to vary depending on where you look, depending on how well your courthouse keeps records and things like that. And looks about the same, but it's another document that I had detailing the buying and selling my property. Some of it is filled in handwriting, which details who and when and any special conditions on the property, and then your regular legal jargon that they used at the time. And sometimes that's amusing to read through also. They put some funny things in there that we don't think of today.
Such as? Whatever.
Yeah, it
Okay,
just depends on what you're looking for. I've got some other stuff. Now, a lot of places you will be able to make a copy, but always ask some of the staff first before you do try and make a copy, because they do have local rules and sometimes the documents are fragile. So you always want to get permission before you do these things.
So are you using the property number or plot number in order to find this document here?
No, back that far, I was using the address of my property, which is over on Grand River, not a far distance from here. If you go further back than that, obviously sometimes the addresses will change along a street, and you might not know how they changed. You would want to have a legal description of your lot and block, which you can get from your tax assessor office. I happen to be lot 1 of block 1 of Ward 1 in the city of Lansing, so it's fairly easy when I'm looking down the columns to look for a string of 1s going across. But I don't know exactly when they used the parcel number. I think it's like about a 15-digit number that Lansing uses now. Like I said, I do mostly 1800 research, and obviously this is something newer for them, but there's several different things you can use, and you would probably want to make sure you have all of that on hand from the tax assessor's office, which could give you all of that.
Oh, you mean 1900, don't you?
No, 1800s. My house
Oh,
was built.
1800s,
Yeah,
okay.
my house was built in 1860,
Okay.
and they did some extensive renovations in 1903, and I was trying to trace the owners from when it was built.
Where's your house located? You said Grand River, but
Yeah, it's 1017 Grand River.
We're
It's-
Pennsylvania.
When you come up Pennsylvania, you'll hit that light right by Brown's Appliance. It's the big red brick house.
oh, I know which one that is, yeah. It's got a solar collector on it.
Mm-hmm. That's just another on that one. All right. Another useful thing to use are the tax assessor records. Now in Lansing, those go back to about 1936 in the tax assessor's office. To go back further, you'll have to go down to the courthouse, and this one is from 1859, I believe, detailing what they did taxes for at that time, but it can give you, I'm not sure how well this is going to show up for you guys, the lot and the block, and sometimes they'll have the address along here, and then they detail the different taxes. They'll have city tax, they'll have a sidewalk tax, there's fire taxes, and there's even a Civil War tax that they taxed, I believe, in 1864 in the city. But this is another one that people like because it shows proof that your property was divided up, they were taxing it, and looking at the amount of taxes from year to year, if you see a large jump in the amount of taxes, that can indicate that a building went up or there was improvements on a building that was there also. So this is something that if you can get a copy of, this is good to prove that your house is there and they're doing something with it.
Where did you say you obtained this?
This was in the state library. Mm-hmm. And again, depending on how far back you want to go, some of these are going to be in the tax assessor's office, some of these will be in the historic libraries, depending on your town or city. And once again, I'd like to thank the staff for allowing me to make copies of some of these while I was doing my research. This is a newer tax assessment, that's right side up, for my property. And this is probably what most people will run into. You can see it starts at 1936, does a lot of detail of building materials. They do a shape of the house, stories, that type of thing. Often it's going to list other details. On mine, on the second page, it says that one of the neighbors talking to the tax assessor said that my house used to be a toll gate house along the road back when she was a girl. Now that's just kind of hearsay, I haven't been able to prove it yet, but it's interesting to find it on an official document such as this. And some of the, like you were commenting, some of the interesting things there, gas lights were used on the house, or they changed to a coal burning stove. Just kind of little anachronisms like that you might find amusing while you're doing your research. Sort of like some of the things you might see in this house.
That's called a tax field sheet, and I think you'd have to ask for those in the assessor's office, because they have them
Oh,
in
yeah.
books. They have them in, bounded books and copies of those.
Right, if they're busy, they'll let you know when it's a good time to come back, but it is possible to get copies of those for your personal use, and once you get a good copy of that, then you can take it home and study it and find the information you need off of that.
Is that by address?
Yes, they can look it up by address, and they can do by parcel lot also. Now we move on to maps, which a lot of people might think is a little bit more fun. Let's see if we can straighten it up a little bit. That's a copy of a Sanborn map, and back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, they went by, and these were usually paid for by businesses, and detailed all of the businesses in the area that they had been paid for. What type of business it was, the stories, sometimes they put addresses on it, what they were made of. Unfortunately, my house didn't have one. My house was out in the township, and it wasn't deemed important enough to go out and pay somebody to actually, get the 2 or 3 houses that was out that way. But if you live in town or you live next to a business that's been there for quite a while, you might be able to find, perhaps, one of these is a house next to some businesses, and they put the information in there just to be thorough because they're doing that whole street. So the Sanborn maps, which the information for the company is in the information package we have, is a good source of information for you also.
That's an
that's
interesting one.
awesome.
That's
Yeah.
East Franklin there in the
Yeah.
river,
Mhm.
and then
Actually, it
shows
should be,
Race Street, north and south.
it should be that way, but.
And it shows that race mill kind of thing that run,
Mhm. And let's see here, I'm not sure where it is. One of the mills down here was owned by the person that owned my house also, which is why I have this section. That's just personal interest for me.
Where do you get those maps at?
Those will be, once again, in the state library, or sometimes you'll find them in your local library. It just depends on how old you're looking for, because they are fairly valuable. They're not usually something they're going to leave out for the public. You'd have to make an appointment for that. Ready? Okay. Now there are county atlases, and let's see if I can get this one right way up here, which are similar to Sanborn's, and plat maps, which detail neighborhood by neighborhood. And this one is, this is my house right here. This is Franklin Street, and you've got High and Ballard, and I'm not sure what's over there, Case or something. And this is the alleyway, and this is my lot right here. And this, it's either, 1868. And that's the earliest map that I could find of my neighborhood. Details the size of the lots. Unfortunately, it doesn't run the addresses all along the bottom, although some of them do. Has some interesting comments on the side. These are all in the library also. And there is a website you can look these up too. But you do need to know the subdivision name to look it up. You can't just kind of put some information in there. You have to actually have the name. But What this tells me is, this is my lot, these are my neighbors. They've actually divided this into 3 lots across with one across the top, which is the way it is today. So I have an original lot and they've subdivided a lot of the other ones.
That's what happened to a lot of lots on corners. They
Mm-hmm.
had that frontage on the other street, so they chopped them up. That alley doesn't go all the way through, that was vacated, part of it, at least that which doesn't give you, I mean, beyond your north property line, it wasn't that vacated.
No, that still goes straight up.
Oh, it does?
Yeah,
That whole
that goes up to almost Lake Lansing, I believe. I haven't taken it up to, up to north.
Okay.
And then Grand River Elementary School would be right over here, about half a block away.
The alley, that's, the alley goes.
Put that in. Ah, okay. I don't have a picture of it myself, but there are bird's-eye view maps, and a lot of libraries like to keep these for the local towns. What they did was they commissioned an artist to imagine himself up in a balloon looking down on the town and do a hand drawing of all the buildings and the topographical features, the forests and the rivers and things like that. We have one here in Lansing, and my house sits right under the seal at the bottom. So, of course, there's another resource that I wasn't able to use, but like when I had the map up there of Franklin Street of the businesses, it has a real nice look going down, looking west on the businesses along Franklin Street. And once again, if you're lucky enough to be in the area that somebody paid to have somebody looking down and drawing on, you can kind of compare your house, and they were pretty accurate, I believe, on some of the details there. Now again, once again, it's not a photograph, so you can't say for absolute certainty that that's the way your house was, but they tried to make it realistic. Let's see. Okay. Wait a few minutes. We'll go back to some paper things without the overhead for a minute here. A good place to go to find out some ancestor histories that might be connected with your house is go down to the local cemetery. Now, we have a cemetery down on Mount Hope where 3 of the people that owned my house are buried. 3 of the people in the 1800s that owned my house are buried, and by using that information that I have on their family and how they were buried and things like that, I know that it was inherited through one of the women of the family who changed her name, and so it's no longer in the Hart family name, but went on to Collins and then Adams. So when I'm looking in the tax records and things like that, I know that I can look under those names also in a certain period of time, and that'll help me keep that continuous line of ownership while I'm trying to, trace it up to the present. So if you have some people that in the past have owned your property or owned your house, then you can look those up, and that'll help you also. Now, has anybody heard of the city directories? I'm sure some of you have. I don't know if, I'm sure they still publish those today. Once again, upside down. And what those are, especially longer back you go, is they take the names of people in town and they're alphabetized and they tell you where they lived. So if you weren't sure of what the address was at a certain time period, but you have, say, the 1926 city directory for Lansing, you can go to the owner of your house, which happened to be Arthur Hart, and this is back too far. This is his hardware store, but it'll tell you where he lived, it'll tell you where he worked, it'll tell you some information about some of the family sometimes also. And I think the next one I have, yes.
Thank you.
There they are. Actually has, there it is, an advertisement from the owner of my house, Hart's Mills. And they had grocery stores, flour mills. They owned quite a bit of property up along Franklin Avenue, which is now Grand River. But as you're looking through the directories for your information, you never know what you're gonna find.
Where was that hardware store in on Franklin Avenue?
It said 3739, which is actually fairly close to the river.
Other way.
Oops. There we go.
So on lots 3730.
And then as you get a little bit further up in time, you'll find out that they put in, AN 627, whatever the phone number happened to be. And I like the old style of advertising. Sometimes they put some funny things in there. And then this is obviously out of Lansing Illustrated. There's a picture of one of the mills that the people that owned my house actually did. And that was, I think, 1890 is when that was published, so. Wish I could claim that, I have something from that, the big family that used to own it and everything, but unfortunately,
Now, that's just a hit or miss, like going through that poll record to see if there's any advertisements like that. It's
Right.
not like an index that.
no,
takes
of
those
advertisers or something, no.
Okay.
There we go, got out of place. Like I was saying, in the cemeteries, got a really good picture, but it's right side up. Where is the bottom of it? Yeah, right over there is where Arthur Hart and his family, actually it's easier to point it up. Right up about there is where Arthur Hart and his family are buried. So whenever we do our cemetery walk, I usually stop by and check it out. And,
Say hello.
yep,
Commune with the spirits.
hasn't told me anything special though. There's no
Okay.
hidden money in the walls or
Oh, boy.
blueprints or anything like that.
Maybe you took them down 6 feet under.
Yeah, dig them up though.
And then this is one of the cemetery records detailing the purchase of the lot. It shows me the name change through the wife in the family who inherited the property and then remarried or never married and then changed names when she did get married. And then
Oh, where'd you get that?
right out of the cemetery office, I just went in and made an appointment and asked to look up some information. And they were very helpful with that and taking some time out and looking up those records for me. And then this is your burial plot, and this shows how they actually interred the coffins. So if you're a fan of Halloween and stuff like that, that might be interesting.
Is that office right across the street?
Yes, it is.
That's for that, just for that cemetery?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. So depending on what city you're in, I'm imagining that hopefully somebody outside of Lansing will see this also. I know that sometimes one office will take care of many cemeteries, so you'd want to make an appointment and go in and give them the names, and they will help you look it up and tell you which cemetery you would need to go to and provide a map for you and that type of information. Let's see. Okay. Now, in our, right side up, good. In our library, we have a collection called the Stebbins Collection where a local realtor took pictures, wrote down information on the houses that went through his office. There's a picture of my house. The house looks the same. Most of the trees are gone, the street light's gone, there's no ivy on the house, but it gives you a picture of, I don't know, must be about 50 years ago, what my house looked like in the streetscape. There's no bushes anymore. You'll also be able to get a lot of information about the house itself.
It says August 15th, 1950 there, doesn't it? 50?
Yeah.
Yes.
August 12th.
So 54 years ago. Tells how much it sold for. Tells you it had a coal stoker furnace, gas lighting. Occasionally they'll put information in on if they upgraded something. This is a little bit more modern than I was looking for, but I include it because some people want to find out, you know, what's been happening recently with their house, maybe before they purchased it from the last owner. And this is just from our library. Now there might be other collections out there like that, but this is just a Lansing library
Can
thing
you
that
have
somebody
access,
donated.
can you have access to that, or do they go and pull that out for you?
They would pull that out for you. Most of those type of things that are irreplaceable
Mm-hmm.
are
Right.
put in a special section, but you can make a request and then they will schedule somebody to pull that out for you and give you a call, or if you're doing something else in the library, they can come find you if they have the time at that time.
That room is no longer open though, is it, downstairs in the basement?
Not at the moment.
Yeah.
They're working to get that open right now though.
Yeah, okay, but that's where they keep all that information.
A lot of it. Some of it's in storage files and, you know, shelves and this and that, so. Here's another couple cards from that collection. Unfortunately, I couldn't buy it for this price, but would have been nice.
445.
And then, you know, this is kind of interesting. They go through and list the utility costs and some of the amenities that come with the house.
It says can be used for real estate or doctor's office, zone commercial. Yeah, that's how it's on there. Commercial.
And I got one more. Yeah, that's right, Sarah. A little bit more recent. This is from the 60s. There we go. And you can see they've removed the trees, put up a nice ugly lamp post there instead of a nice old type, and taking down all the shrubs. But it's still my house.
Interesting to find out who lived there then, because obviously they were like a mechanic or something, or a carpenter.
Well, there's a little local history there. The gentleman used to run a car shop in the 50s, Smallwood, and I have the articles that aren't in the presentation, but he did get arrested by the FBI for running a chop shop out of the back garage.
That's what the tool shop is?
Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, that's part of the history that I don't usually advertise.
Is that Bill Smallwood?
I believe so. I haven't.
Yeah, 'cause he's still around town and doing stuff like that.
Well, I don't mean to say anything bad about him if he's still around town, but
Yeah, we know Bill Smallwood.
I do have the articles for all of that that happened. And let's see here. And of course you can, there we go, go down to your local realtor office, and if it's sold recently, they'll have information on the current specs, how many rooms, square footage, utilities, and that type of thing that I put in there just to make sure that when it sells, you know, I move on and it sells, that you keep the information in an unbroken line there. And we won't say how much I overpaid for it, but now there are a couple other things that I don't have some overheads for, but there are other resources that you can look for to get information on your house. And we went through there. There are flood insurance maps if you're in a floodplain that you have to be registered to get insurance for. You can go down to your building inspector's office. Now that's kind of a hit or miss thing. I went down and they don't keep any physical records after 74. They did look in the microfiche or the microfilm that they keep some of the older records on. And I did get some other things back in the 50s, but it really don't have anything past that. So, but it's always, you know, interesting to see if somebody did something here or something there in the basement or the attic or whatever. If you're really that interested, you can put the time in and put a request in, and somebody can dig that information up for you at their office. Now, I haven't personally been able to find anything on my house in the local paper. But if you have a good local paper, they're putting their articles online and into a computer index, and you can either log on or have somebody at the office log on and look for you through the articles by the address, or maybe if you know who used to live there. And perhaps they can pull something up on someone famous that used to live there. They were headlining an article in the paper, they threw a big party there, the house burned, or something like that. So your local paper is a good resource also.
Nice thing about that is a lot of that's on, I don't know, internet, or you can get a lot of the state journal stuff now, even in archives.
Mm-hmm. Now this one doesn't actually have a title, but this is what happened to my house in 80, 81, 82. It was abandoned. Vandals went in, tore out all the doors, clawfoot bathroom, bathtub, tore up floorboards. It was pretty much condemned. The city took part in a federal program where they took a lottery in the city and somebody won it for $1. And of course, you know, they had to put in some money after winning it to fix it up to code, and the city put in money and the Fed put in money. But this is Gail Jamson, who in 1982 won the house. You can see nobody was taking care of it, so the bushes grew up and the vines came back and things like that. But you know, he was a proud homeowner at 12%, and fixed everything up, put in 27 doors in the house. There's a couple other things in there that might be of interest to you. But I thought that was kind of funny that that was the only house in the city that I know of that actually went through that program where the city put it up for a lottery and somebody won it. And they actually rehabilitated a house like that. And I think the reason it didn't go on was because the federal money stopped coming in. We'll leave that up there just for some show there. If you really want to get into looking up the people side of your house, genealogy societies are good. If you know some of the people that have lived in your house, especially if they've got some background that makes them famous in town, you can use that to see if anybody recognizes the name, did they do anything special. I've had a lot of help in town here with the Historical Society, with people in the library, that I just kind of keep pestering and asking questions. And you know anything about my house? And I found this out. Does that remind you of anything? And actually, some people have come up and said, yeah, that did remind me of something. You might look here, or you might look there, and it gives you a new avenue to look for information. You can go and look through some more records, birth records, marriage, death certificates. Sometimes when you're looking through those grantor, grantee indexes, like I said, it'll pass through the wife who might remarry and change names, so you'll lose track of that ownership chain. And if you know through looking through those, you can find out those different name changes and look it up under her new name to find out where the deed is for the sale of the house. Now, I haven't looked any through these yet, but somebody has told me you can look through census records too. Often, especially the older ones, will provide you with some information, especially if your house is famous or was used for some city purpose. Maybe it was a farm, just something that made it stand out. Sometimes the census will list something in there for you also. And then you would, you know, hopefully after slogging through all that paperwork, you'll find something and it will go, all right, I got something good. Now, I've called the local utility. We have Board of Water and Light, and they told me that utilities were put in about 1903 when they did a lot of renovation on the house, but they can't really tell me anything else. Unfortunately, their records weren't that accurate back at that time. And then once we get a little bit further, I have other records that confirm who owned the house. So, but sometimes your utility records, if the company keeps them long enough, will help you with ownership there. And they can tell you when they switched from gas lighting to electric lighting, or when they took that coal stove out and put in a forced hot air furnace. And once again, Don't forget your local groups, genealogy groups, your local history groups, the public library. There just might be a neighborhood group. You could go to your neighborhood association. Sometimes they'll have records on some of the things that go on in the neighborhoods. People build a house, or so-and-so sold it and that upset the neighborhood, so they had a big meeting about it. Or they might have information on what you're looking for about your house. And your neighbors, even though it's kind of a second-hand thing, my neighbor, who I got the abstract from, actually lived in my house as a child when she was in grade school for half a year before her parents moved out of town, and then she moved back. So it was kind of interesting that, you know, she was pointing out things when I took her on a tour when I bought it. So you might get lucky that way too. Do you have any questions while I'm up front here?
I'm glad you mentioned that last thing, because sometimes we miss the most obvious, is talking to the neighbors, you know, and if it's not the current neighbor, it could be the neighbor's grandmother or great-grandmother that's still alive that comes along with all the stories, and, I mean, that's, you might have photographs of things in the house, you know, in the house or inside the house.
Actually, what Gail did when he bought the house is he took a class out at LCC, and I think there was 5 students in the class with him. They went back and interviewed all of the owners that they could that were still living in Lansing. And some of the information is good and some of the information is kind of fuzzy, but it's kind of interesting to read through the transcripts of the tape recorded conversations they got from previous owners and what they did with the house and what the neighborhood was like, and, you know, the type of people that used to live there and things like that. So, you know, never hurts to try.
No. One of the most recent uses of that structure was Teen Challenge.
That's who I bought it from.
That's what I think.
I'm still fixing it up.
Is he still around?
He's retired. He retired from the state, so I haven't been able to track him down. He retired probably 7 or 8 years ago, I believe.
Even though he says he hopes to stay there permanently,
Well,
unless paying for 2 children in college forces him to sell it to pay their bills.
and a 12% mortgage too is kind of expensive too, especially compared to nowadays. But
Yeah. Bad.
I've had a lot of fun doing this. You will have to put some time in, I'll tell you that, and there are some setbacks. You might think you find something, and then it turns out that, you know, I misread something and it wasn't the person I was looking for, or I thought it was something and it turns out to be a dead end. But it is rewarding to find out that information, that somebody did own your house that was famous, or, you know, does have some historical significance. I had a few gentlemen last month come over from the State Historic Preservation Society. They looked at my house and they said that this is redone in 1903. This is one of the earliest brick veneer houses they've ever seen in this area, because it's not a solid brick, it's a brick over the house. And also the capstone on top of the foundation, between the foundation and the first floor, they believe was made locally. And prior to that, everything was shipped in from the East Coast to make that type of cement and do the capstone and the walls and things like that. And they said that based on what they were looking at, they think it was made locally, and they, you know, hadn't seen that early either. So you never know who's going to tell you something new. Anything else anybody would like to say?
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight.
Do you
Do you
have any
have a historic
questions?
background, kind of, or is it just your interest
This
in
should be
the,
all good.
you've got the house, or have you done this quite a bit in the
I
past?
blame my parents. They used to take me to all the forts and history sites and tours when we were going on summer vacations and things like that. So I guess that's where I got my interest from.
Is this your first home, or have you had other homes?
No, this is my first home. So I'm still a work in progress.
And how long has it taken you to gather all the information you have so far?
I did most of this the first year that I've had the house. It's been kind of hard. I mean, I'm working a lot more. I work for the post office in East Lansing, and they haven't been hiring anybody, so as people retire, we work more and more. But it's harder and harder for me to find the information because I've been to the courthouse 3 or 4 times to look for the information. I've been to the libraries and you know, I don't mind asking questions, but I don't want to take up too much time because there are other people trying to use the resources and things like that. And you know, once you look through them a few times, there's only so much you're going to get out of the tax records or this book or that book. So until I can find a new avenue, you know, like the census records or the agricultural records or something like that, you know, I'm kind of right at a standstill right now. But you know, it's not a bad body of work to, you know, say I can trace my tax records on the property back to 1859. I can, you know, show who was in the house back there through city directories and tax records. You know, I know where these people are buried in the local cemetery and that type of stuff. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it makes for a good party talk.
But,
You know, what'd be interesting too is to see if there's any descendants of that Hart family around and talk to them.
see, I'd have to go to the Genealogical Society. I don't believe so because when I was talking to the lady at the office of the cemetery, she said that the people with the plot next to them wanted to buy their plot because they weren't using the whole thing and they weren't able to track anybody down. So I haven't really spent a whole
You know,
lot of
it's
time
interesting,
looking
the
that
reason
way.
I mentioned that is because I started researching myself online in my family, and I hadn't done it before. And my grandfather owned a house in Gary, Indiana, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And it's in very bad condition, but there's been a whole movement there in Gary to try to save this house, which they had no idea if there was any Winans left living. And so I contacted somebody, and they were shocked to hear
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I mean, they really were. They were just so excited. And they wanted, you know, all this information, so now I'm digging it up for them, and it's kind of interesting. 'cause,
Yeah,
you know,
sometimes that paper trail just kind of dead ends somewhere and it might
Right.
pick up somewhere else, but unfortunately, you know, there's no bridging between there unless you get lucky and hear something or somebody points you in the right direction.
Yeah, I found that was kind of an interesting revelation, so I sort of start thinking about that now, where, hey, you know, maybe there's some descendants out there that would really be interested in what you're doing.
Am I allowed to do a plug for my next speech?
Of course, I'm sure this group would love to hear about
Is
it.
this the first in a series?
For
Well,
me it
he-
is.
Yeah,
In this series?
he's gonna get one at the
I also
Historical
am a
Society.
member of the Historical Society of Greater Lansing, and next month, I believe it's the 17th, it's a Wednesday, at the public library, I'll be giving a talk similar to this. It's how to look at your house and try and figure out some history of your house through construction. Looking at the foundation, the types of building techniques they used, plaster types and things like that. It's a little bit shorter because I don't really have anything to drag in, but everybody's welcome to show up. It's a free event, and I'd be glad to see you all there.
Sound good?
And once again, thank you everybody
Thank
for
you
showing up
very
tonight.
much.